Halo, halo? Halo, halo? O, no idą już, więc siadajmy, bo już jest 20. No dobrze mówię, idą, więc siadajmy, więc powiedziałem. Ladies and gentlemen, we're slowly getting started, so please proceed to the sittings. I would like to ask panelists to take the first rows in order to make the logistics while changing the panels. Witamy pana przedstawiciela. Minister Bolesta. Idzie już tam. Ten mikrofon jest... Lady, Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Uh, we're getting started our event on sustainable energy security. And I would like to ask our host, Mr. Arkadiusz Pluciński, Ambassador, Deputy Permanent Representative, for the welcoming words.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed guests, dear Dita, dear Minister Chris, dear Minister Wojciech should be there as well. Dear colleagues, it is my great pleasure to welcome you to our premises and to this important conference. It is time where we come together to discuss one of the most pressing issue and one of the priority of the Polish Presidency, energy security in Europe. In recent years, the EU has been tested in many dimensions. In a half of decade, we have seen many things, inter alia, energy being used as a weapon, with Gazprom's refusal to fill European gas storage or accept payments in euro, the sabotage of Nord Stream, and quite lately, direct attacks on critical infrastructure in the Baltic region. We faced also unfavorable weather conditions impacted on intermittent energy sources with historic underperformance of wind power during the autumn 2021. Also, we faced our exposure to volatile external markets when faced record high gas and energy prices when we were not far from the very, very serious market intervention. We faced deep divisions, still not finally overcome, regarding the most optimal energy mix, to put it mildly. And finally, there is also a strong push to add yet another adjective to the current debate, meaning affordable, to make the EU fit for external competition in challenging geopolitics. All of those have materialized at an extraordinary pace, pushing us into a series of crises, but also to quite innovative solutions. To name a few, gas filling obligation, now under revision, or aggregate EU instrument and the whole repower package. High day for new investment in energy security infrastructure and renewables. If after all this, someone still argues that we do not need a new strategy, I truly don't know what more it would take to convince them. The reality is clear. The European Union urgently needs a new energy security strategy, one that reflects technological progress and the evolving global landscape, from geopolitics and competitiveness to climate change. In the same time, those past years have exposed Europe's vulnerabilities, making it clear that energy security cannot be treated in isolation. It must be integrated with climate objectives and economic affordability. The challenges ahead are significant, but so are the opportunities. This conference is a chance to forge new ideas, strengthen cooperation, and develop a strategic vision that ensures Europe's energy security for the future. So thank you for being here. I look forward to the very insightful discussions ahead. And now let me pass the floor to Joanna Pandera, who together with her colleagues is the mastermind behind the concept of today's event. Let's get to work.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Arek, for hosting us here, and thank you for collaboration in preparation of this event. I would like to start with, I think that if you think about Poland, energy, climate, and security, then immediately you think also about coal. It has been the story of Poland for the last years. However, things are really changing quick. World is changing, technologies are changing. Basically, entire environment, political environment is changing, and Poland is also changing. When I started to deal with energy topics, Poland has 90% of coal in electricity mix. Last year, on average, it was 57% of coal in electricity mix. So it may be that we are one of the countries in Europe which is now fastest changing countries. So you see actually the motivation to change the energy system and to change the approach. However, there are of course many challenges related with this, including energy prices, social acceptance, and keeping flexibility of the power system and basically keeping the lights on. Forum Energii was established 9 years ago with the assumption that we want to support energy transition and we want to find pragmatic ways on how to make it happen in Poland. And basically the main motivation of this change, which we could see in the last year, was not necessarily really climate, and let's be honest about this, even if it's the big topic and we know climate crisis is there, but it was exactly this need of change, but also cost of energy. And basically this concept, which we want to introduce to you today, started to develop already 5 years ago. And it came actually from different surprises, which we as Forum Energii had. So our main objective is to deal with power market, heating, financing, cities, renewables integration. But like 5 years ago, a colleague of mine, all professional, told me, you know, Joanna, once you want to really end the discussion in energy sector, then say energy security. And then discussion will be killed. And in fact, for many years, it was like end of the discussion, energy security. And now I think we live in times where it needs to be really new start of the discussion. There was also next surprise, which for us, when we realized that actually data on fossil fuel imports are actually not available. So we were the first institution in Poland which published data on energy import bills in entire history. And then everybody was surprised how it comes that we are coal country because it makes us independent, and we paid 200 billion euro in the last 15 years for energy imports. It also is changing mind. I think also what is now very interesting, what was surprise for us, then we realized that the last energy security strategy appeared in 2014. It was adopted short after Crimea annexation, and it focused actually mainly on fossil fuel diversification supplies. However, not each country in Europe really followed that path, and now it's 11 years. What happened in the last 10 years, we all know very well. So we need really new energy strategy, and which connects the dot. World is very complex. I see on one hand that actually after many years, we are basically sailing in Europe on the same boat. In the same boat. So it's not that like 10 years ago where the strong opposition against climate policy appeared, where actually energy mixes were different paths of how to approach it. My feeling, probably you may also disagree with me, is that I see what happens in all places, and we know that renewables is our goal, and probably somehow optimizing fossil fuel use, but the direction is really very clear. It means that we need really new strategy. We need to put different accents on the topics which are mainly relevant. The system based on renewables will work completely differently compared to the old system based on conventional power plants, which means we need to have flexibility, we need to have electricity market, we need to also take care for critical raw materials, we need to be focused on production of those technologies in Europe, so there will be no technology dependence. But what is also very clear that in this completely unexpected world nowadays, that we really will collaborate much more within the EU. So it's not, and I know that's a really poison topic to speak about common energy policy or to speak about common governance on how to manage energy system. Some people warned me not to speak about it today, but I truly believe that we need to at least have integrated infrastructure planning. And this is a topic where we work together with Agora, and Frauke Thies will say a bit later about this, why it is so relevant, that we can save a lot of money when we will really collaborate stronger together. What is also very relevant, that we will be very firm when it comes to Russian fossil fuels. So it is a next surprise for me a bit to see that now we are going more and more relaxed, that competitiveness of the EU is of course very relevant, is probably the key topic, but then so maybe we should come back to the Russian gas. And this is something which in my view will really threaten our security. So we need to really, the part of our new energy strategy should be really very firm on Russian fossil fuels. And last word, because I'm already over the time, that the collaboration is very important. And this is why I would like to thank Szymon Kardaś, Georg Zachman, Ugne, for the collaboration in preparation of this report. It was not the report which was a result of a project which we planned and basically for years. It was actually, it came from our collaboration on other topics where we realized that actually we feel the same way about energy security in Europe. So this is why I would like to thank colleagues that we actually developed this study together, and now we can present it to you, and I hope it will have an impact on the debate. For Poland, security was always very relevant. It was maybe not always perceived in a way which was really very productive, but now I have the feeling that everybody is aware that security is really a big topic, but we need to not come back to the old models and old system, but we need to still think about energy security, really planning the future and having different new technologies available and new also approaches. So thank you for coming. Thank you, our guests, for accepting our invitation to the panels. And I really hope the discussion will be fruitful, fresh, and also we will get some critique maybe. Thank you very much. And I would like to invite Dite Juul Jorgensen to take the floor, Director General of DG NR.
Thank you very much, Joanna. Thank you very much, Arek, for the invitation to join you here. Thank you to the Polish Presidency more generally for the focus on security, energy security. It is top of the European agenda now. But it has been top of the Polish agenda, I think, for much, much longer than that. Poland has been a front runner in energy security, security of supply, both in words, but also very much in action. The synchronization of the Baltic countries just recently was only possible thanks to Poland and the Harmony Link. The Baltic pipeline is a Polish project, but it is also very much a European project for our common security. And so we see very concrete results of your efforts. As you have also said, the crisis we have been going through, the energy crisis over these last few years, both has shown both that secure, affordable energy is key for our security, our wider security, key for our competitiveness, but it has also shown that the dependence of imported fossil fuels is essentially a security risk, and the dependence on Russian fossil fuels is an even bigger risk. And so we do need to address that factor in our energy system, and that's part of the things, part of the efforts that are ongoing within the Commission to prepare a roadmap how to phase out Russian energy in our system. And the crisis and our response to the crisis also showed how much better we are, how much more secure we are, how much more resilient we are when we work together. The cross-border infrastructure is just one example of that, but the many decisions, the many efforts, the many initiatives during the crisis show that very, very clearly. So it is not surprising that energy security is one of the key pillars of the competitiveness compass of the Commission that came out earlier this year. It is also part of the Clean Industrial Deal and the Affordable Energy Action Plan. Insecurity drives up energy prices. Risk and volatility in themselves are risk both to our security, but also to our competitiveness. In that context, we saw also the European Preparedness Strategy identifying the resilience of critical societal functions like energy as a priority area for action in this wider security, defense, and preparedness work that we are carrying out, and also therefore that our ongoing review of the security of the energy security framework is of course part of the preparedness union, a necessary element of that. And we have a relatively good security of supply framework within the European Union. It is the result of difficult experiences over the past decades. It is a result of increasing cooperation, of a recognition of diversification, solidarity, cooperation as necessary components for security. But what we also saw these last 3 years is that the framework was not quite sufficient in itself. We had to add as the crisis developed, and we did that. So we have learned quite a lot of lessons, also difficult lessons these last 3 years, and we now need to reflect that in the review in the future security framework. We also need to reflect the fact that the energy system is changing. There will be more electrification. We see a climate risk as well as the more general security risks. So these are just some of the factors that we need to integrate into our security of supply framework. Of course, in addition to what we already know, critical infrastructure, cybersecurity, as a couple of other considerations. For the European Union, because dependence on imported fossil is a security risk in itself, the energy transition is by far the most effective mechanism to make ourselves more secure. We need to lower that dependence on imported fossil fuels. Our domestically produced renewable energy or low carbon energy will help reduce that dependence on imports, whether it is renewables or nuclear, just as energy savings, energy efficiency is a way to reduce that dependence on imported fuels. We've seen that very concretely during the crisis, that the accelerated deployment of renewable energy was one of the very effective, very efficient means to reduce the Russian energy imports. We replaced some of the Russian gas by renewable energy, we replaced some of it by energy savings and energy efficiency, and then of course we replaced a lot of it by diversified supplies from other suppliers from across the world. But still, import dependency is a consideration and it is an issue for us. In addition to that diversification, that supply side, adding the renewables to it, critical infrastructure we have seen, as you also mentioned in your introduction, critical infrastructure has become a clear threat, a clear risk to us. The Baltic has been the hardest hit. We have several examples, but it is not the only place that is at risk, and so it is a concern for all of Europe. Similarly, resilience on some suppliers in our supply chains, what we need for the green energy technology, whether it's critical minerals or technologies, there's a very high degree of concentration globally, and that is, of course, also a security risk that we need to look at. Now, when you look at the protection of our critical infrastructure, we have a very good common regulatory framework across the European Union. One of the things we can see is that the protection needs to be fully integrated as a security, as a preparedness feature, but the repair also has to be integrated. A lot has been learned about both security of energy systems, but also repair, replacement, and recovery over the last few years in Ukraine, where their energy system has been under constant attack. So we need to draw the lessons from that as well. Difficult as it is, it has become a central feature in defense and security also for the European Union. In terms of repair, we have put out an action plan on cable security, really looking at how do we make sure that whatever is destroyed is repaired as quickly as possible. And then, of course, we need to work closely with NATO. We've done that already in a task force on critical infrastructure, enhancing the collective resilience, and so there will be more work on that. On the value chains that I mentioned and critical minerals, as well as the technologies, we have our Net Zero Industry Act, really aiming to build to build strategic value chains in Europe, supply chains in Europe, but also trying to make sure that whenever we launch a public tender for wind or for any other system, we build in resilience criteria so that our transition does not simply strengthen our dependence, but rather strengthens our resilience over the as part of the transition. We also know that as much of the manufacturing we would like to have in Europe from a strategic perspective, we do need partners. We do need imports, we do need trade and investment relationship with partners, and so we're developing clean trade and investment partnerships, the latest one between the European Union and South Africa, strongly related to critical minerals, again, part of our resilience and part of our energy transition. So those are some of the considerations ongoing within the European Commission as part of our review of the current security of supply framework, but also looking beyond energy security in the narrower sense to really looking at the security of our system, the resilience of our systems, given the very high degree of uncertainty in our global economy, not just in the energy systems. My final word would be that we have to make sure in everything we do that energy security is not an add-on. It is not as if we develop something and then we add a bit of security at the end. We need to integrate that security, that resilience, that preparedness, that defense part from the very beginning, from the very outset, in all of our policies in order to be genuinely secure and genuinely resilient. And in that, I know that you, as Poland, from your national experience, your history, all the efforts you have made over the last decades, are better placed than anyone to help us understand what that means in practical terms. And so it really is a great pleasure to work with the Polish Presidency also on energy security, in addition to the other objectives. Thank you very much for that.
And now I'd like to ask to take the floor Mr. Krzysztof Bolesta, Deputy Minister for Climate and Environment.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Very happy to be here where I feel like home. And it's really difficult acts to beat when you speak after Dita and Asha. Most of you are the energy policy wonks, so it's really difficult to come up with something you don't already know. But I'll try. I think that it's fair to say that in Poland we always had a knack for speaking about energy security, and we've been banging on about this for forever. Some of you at least might feel that. And now the tagline for the Polish presidency is Security Europe. So 7 different pillars of security, and energy security is one of them. Very much into the whole spectrum of security, which is unfortunately very in vogue right now. It's also nice to remember that in 2014, PM at the time, Donald Tusk, came out with the idea of energy union. And energy security was very much in the kernel of the idea of energy union. And he got elected as the president of the European Council, and he's back as the PM of Poland, and again, security is in vogue, and we know how it works. So I think you are in safe hands in terms of presidency. But I think it's also important to realize that when you speak about energy, energy security is basically the mother of energy policy in the Commission. Of course, oil stocks, oil and gas, everyone knows that, but renewables target and energy efficiency targets, so 2 out of 3 headline targets, basically come from the background of taking care of energy security. Energy efficiency, big policy push from the oil crisis in 1973. The first policy on energy, on renewables, was based on the white paper from 1997, if I remember correctly. And if you read the white paper, some of you might, it's not that great, but it's a nice piece of history. A lot of the text is basically proving that renewables is more independence and lower energy bill, because energy bill was very, very big at the time. And renewables was and still is a reason to cut on dependency. And you know, we had all the measures in place and we forgot security. We forgot security because we had policies. And then the unprovoked Russian aggression on Ukraine came and the world started to unravel under our feet. And everything has changed. And I think there are 4 points I would like to make that result from that war and are big lessons for us in Europe. First is, I think most people, mostly in Western Europe, realize, because we knew it in our part of Europe all the way, that energy has a dual use. It can heat your homes, it could drive your cars, but it is a weapon. It is a weapon that can be wielded and it could hold in a tight fist countries, but also the whole continent as Europe. Second lesson is that it doesn't have to be a hot war, because it is what we are experiencing in Europe, a hybrid war. A hybrid war, that means that we had experienced over the past few years 6 suspected acts of sabotage, destroying 11 subsea cables on the Baltic. And if we don't do anything about this, it will continue. And it will also spread to other seas as well. Because with climate change working its way, even the North Sea is not safe, because you can be, approached from the north. But physical dangers are not the only way. Cybersecurity is becoming a big issue. Our critical infrastructure is day after day attacked by cyber acts of war, basically. And the third element, not many people realize this, is targeted state-sponsored disinformation effort, targeting energy policies, our climate policies, our environmental policies. We have proven in Poland through a very deep exercise that there is a state-sponsored Russian and Belarusian attack, which basically is disinformation on our policies. And I think we also realized, this is number 3, the extent of our dependency, and Dita actually explained this. It's the oil and gas bill, but it's also dependence on clean tech, on software. This is all growing out of proportion. And just for you to realize, because you know these figures, but we are discussing to detail how big is the RRF, the Resilience and Reform Facility, how big it is and how difficult it will be to refinance it. And it was 700-something billion euro. Last year, we paid for energy imported into Europe 600 billion, 1 year. So basically the same amount we spent as a very, very extra effort of our EU budget. And I think one last point, one lesson, affordability is a part of every definition, respected definition of energy security. And we kind of failed on providing this energy price affordability to our citizens. And that is the fourth lesson. And I promise you, this is the peak pessimism of my speech. Now it will get brighter. I think the bright lesson, the bright things for us, not so much for the Ukrainians who are learning these lessons the hard way, are the four things that they are learning and and we can use when discovering the issue of energy security. And Asha and Dita also alluded to these. Diversity, tech neutrality. This is something that we should consider when building our systems. Decentralization, agility, the speed of the energy investment in Ukraine is just staggering, and it's mostly in renewables as well, because it's faster that you can build these sources of energy. And interconnection, that is also helping Ukrainians, but also us sometimes to balance the market and to lower the prices. So these lessons, I think, should be factored in when we think about the energy security. And now I'll finish with the 5 considerations, I would say, on what we should consider when building the new version of energy security, because we must do that, because it's our notion of energy security is still stuck in the 20th century, at least 20th century. First is the protection. We need to improve the physical protection of our critical infrastructure, but also the cyber security threat needs to be mitigated better. But also, we need to learn how to better deal with this information, because it is hampering our policy-making efforts. Second, independence. And Dita mentioned this already. I think there's no doubt that no matter what, we need to finish with Russian imported energy, as scheduled by 2027. But we've learned with geopolitical instability that energy dependency is an issue. So we must strive to limit, to the extent possible, all energy imports. All energy imports, but also we need to take care about technology, about software, and maybe even about ownership structures of certain critical infrastructure elements. Consideration number 3, sustainability. We see from Ukrainian example that green electricity is more resilient. It also has a factor in mitigating energy prices, so also something to consider. Number 4, affordability. I already mentioned this. This is a problem. We need to really push on to try to decrease the prices of the transition to. Of course, energy security will have a price, but it's price worth paying, because it doesn't come with strings attached, as some energy imports. And number 5, togetherness. I think this is the time where we come together in Europe to work on the new concept of energy security. The crisis in Ukraine proves that we can work together and we achieve great results. So I think more Europe is certain aspects of energy policy very much makes sense, and we should make sure that the new energy union concept is enforced even better. And I like the title of the report, Sustainable Energy Security. I just want to twist it a bit. I think we should work towards sustainable EU energy independence. That should be our objective. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister. Well, completing the introductory part and the welcoming part, and start with the first panel. which will be, I will introduce myself because it will be me who will be speaking, but not alone, together with my colleagues Georg Zachman and Szymon Kardaś from ECFR. Please take a seat. I will present you some of our findings. I will repeat what Minister Bolesta just said, that it's difficult to talk about so many interesting speeches and statements, but anyway, we'll try. We don't have a choice. We have to show you what our findings was. The report that we've published a couple of days ago and would like to also discuss today with you is the result of the several months of the work and on the consultation with very broad energy stakeholders. We organized the workshops in Brussels, in Warsaw, in Berlin, even in Kiev, when we got the insights from many stakeholders, including TSOs, officials, senior government officials, international organization representatives and industry experts. And we were working also on the basis of the different individual consultations with the colleagues. Can I get the slides, please? Yeah. And this report is also, as Joanna already mentioned, the result of the collaboration between the experts from different organizations, not only the Forum Energii, so it's to say Georg Zachman and Ugne Kaliskaute, which is sitting there from Bruegel, Szymon Kardaś from European Council on Foreign Relations, and Maciek Zaniewicz, which is also somewhere there, and myself from Maciek Jakubik from Forum Energii. The focus of the work was addressing the emerging challenges related to the energy security in times of climate change, in times of technology advancement, but also in times of the geopolitical tensions, and we observe. And we are also, we could say, happy that the European Commission started the consultation on the energy security regulations in gas and in electricity in autumn, but also a Polish presidency which gave the, first slide please, which also prioritized the energy security. We thought that it's a good occasion to come up with some fresh new conclusions and to show how this energy security is changing, what are the new dimensions of the energy security, and what should be, thank you, and what should be done in order to address them. And in our paper, you will find some also relations to the historical context, which was mainly the focus on the availability and affordability of fossil fuels, which underpinned the economic growth and was one of the drivers of the development of the European economy in the past. But we also saw that there was a crisis that happened some dozens years ago in 70s, the oil crisis, then the gas crisis, which exposed Europe's vulnerability. But now, today, we see that these things are changing. The share of renewables is growing, digitalization is coming, but the energy bill, as also Minister Bolesta said, is constantly growing, and this is something which makes this vulnerability in Europe. And we came to the conclusions, the three main conclusions, that we have these three major shifts that call for the change in thinking in the energy security. And the first is, of course, this energy transition that brings the new opportunities, but also brings challenges. Domestically produced energy, mainly based on RES, will constitute the dominant energy supply in the EU in the coming years, which will reduce gradually the dependence on import. But the new challenges will come, which will be linked to the variability, to the proper system management, and etc. The second shift or second circumstances is the lessons from the recent energy crisis that expose the weaknesses of the EU energy system. And the first is, of course, the over-reliance on the external supplier, mainly the one supplier and the main supplier and the source of energy, but also the technological risk, also the reliance too much on the one sources of energy, but also the effects of climate change, because it considered the droughts that year. And the second, what I already mentioned is the new geopolitical headwinds. And this is, of course, the Russian war of aggression against Ukraine, but it's also the reshaping and redefining global alliances, rivalry over the technologies, over the new resources also, like critical raw materials, and the changing coalition and the global scene. And this is the reality that we have to tackle today. But what will be the factors that will impact the energy security? And Georg will tell you about them.
Thanks. First of all, thanks a lot to Johanna and Maciej for inviting me to this fascinating journey through 4 capitals and allowing for really good events and discussions that we had in the preparation of this report. In my view, with energy security, it is a bit, as they say, about defense. So we should not prepare for the last crisis, but we should prepare for the next crisis. And what we see is that the challenges that we have ahead of us are coming very fast. They're coming from very different directions and very strongly. So we will not see the energy crisis of 2022 and 2023 again. The next energy crisis might be very differently. And that's why we put quite a bit of effort in the report in putting together all these things that also Dieter and Krzysztof already mentioned. In my view, possibly the most important change is that when thinking about energy security, we will be faced with a significantly increased share of electricity in our system. So going from something like 20–25% today to more than 50% and later maybe more than 2/3 of our energy supplies coming from electricity. And protecting this system, developing this system is going to be crucial. The good news is that a lot of this electricity will be produced domestically with renewables, potentially with nuclear, so we will have much less import dependencies. But that also means that we need to consider what we do about the declining fossil fuels. So how do we ensure that there is not increasing concentration of the remaining fossil fuels from individual countries and new vulnerabilities arising from that, because we only buy them from the cheapest source, which happens to be Saudi Arabia or any other individual country. We also, and Johanna mentioned that, need to consider that climate change is real and happening fast. So we need to protect our system to changing wind and hydro patterns, to risk of extreme weather events, something that we haven't done in the past to that degree, and which we start to already feel in the running of thermal power plants, for example. In a clean electricity system, we also need to think about new things. We don't have to think about fossil fuels that we import anymore, or that much more, but we need to think about the imports of materials and technologies. So risks also for example, cyber risks associated with inverters and other technology that we buy from abroad, where we need to be protected. Given that the geopolitical developments out there are really drastic, and the Deputy Minister mentioned that, and I can only highlight the situation we are in my view, is really something that is shaping essentially the next decade for the European Union. We need to be more aware and more prepared for physical and cybersecurity risks. My understanding is, and also from what we got from the meetings in the different member states, that a lot is being done, but it's still not visible whether there is a consistent, fully integrated strategy at hand. And with that, I pass on to Szymon for the next slide.
Yes. Thank you, Georg. I will just introduce you. Yes, in this thinking what the future would like, we thought that it would be good to find the principles that should constitute the basis of the energy security in the future, and Szymon will tell you about that.
Thanks a lot, and I would like to join Georg in expressing my gratitude to Forum Energii for inviting me to take part in this fascinating project. Yes, I mean, we thought that it would be good to base this new approach towards energy security on two pillars or two key principles. We name them multidimensionality on the one hand, and on the other, collectiveness. And I'm glad because the deputy minister mentioned togetherness, and I think that we had more or less the same thing in mind, although we used different words. And very briefly, I mean, what do we think should be included when it comes to those two pillars or two principles? When it comes to multidimensionality, it is clear for us that energy security should be perceived as something that has different dimensions and different areas that should be taken into account in terms of policies that are pursued by the EU and EU member states. So first of all, I mean, when it comes to energy policy, which is one of the elements, it should go beyond fossil fuels. It should go beyond the security of supply issues. Should focus on issues like flexibility, of course, expanding in renewables energy, expanding in terms of grids and stuff like that. Integrating energy security with climate goals. And our message is that we should perceive the energy transition as a process that is strengthening the energy security of the European Union and individual EU member states. Trade policy. We believe that the trade policy tools could be also used in a broader extent in order to make the energy security more consistent. Combining the defense aspects, the defense policy aspects pursued individually by member states, but also, I mean, joining efforts with the international organizations like NATO, it's an important part. I mean, considering the challenges and the threats that are coming, and many of those threats have been already mentioned during our today's meeting by previous speakers. Of course, this multidimensional approach should also include the technological innovation, should include focusing on specifically on the cyber resilience, because I mean this is something that creates more and more challenges for us, and finally, of course, the question of industrial policy and industrial policy of the EU and of course individual member states. When it comes to the second pillar, and if we may, the collective approach or collectiveness or togetherness, as Deputy Minister Bolesta named it, we strongly believe that there should be more joint effort taken on the EU level in terms of the strategy that should be truly unified. I mean, combining different approaches that we are facing right now, EU-wide cooperation with greater responsibility on the EU level for complementing the national efforts. Of course, the question of interconnectivity and shared infrastructure, there are still some gaps that need to be filled in terms of delivering on the energy security agenda. One point that actually it's also important is the question of the demand aggregation. And of course, on the one hand, I mean, we believe that the market plays an important role, but at the same time, I mean, examining the options of using some specific instruments are not excluded if the market doesn't work. So we believe that this is something that also should be included in this respect. And integrated planning, actually, Joanna mentioned it already, so I will stop here.
Thanks, Szymon. And yeah, and we come to the conclusion of the call, and our message today is that the EU needs the new policy documents. Speakers previously already mentioned that the European Union energy security strategy was drafted in 2014, and it doesn't reflect the reality that we have today in the energy sector, the reality that we have today in our also external world. So this new strategy is urgently needed, and it will be the building block of that. It will be the base of the future energy security architecture in the EU. Yes, so firstly, we need some kind of long-term strategy which will trades the main layers on the sector, and then on this strategy we can revise the legislation, we can add up the new elements that are needed. And this strategy should of course address these evolving new emerging risks and challenges, but also should integrate the climate goals with energy security, as already Szymon mentioned. And what is important also in the paper, we propose the definition or the redefinition or some addition to the definition of energy security, which also encompass this broader context. But what should be in this strategy? What should constitute the main building blocks? I would like to Georg and Szymon to quickly tell us.
So for me, one of the main building blocks of energy security going forward is that we ensure efficient coordination of investment and dispatch in Europe through integrated markets and through joint planning. That is for me the core of energy security in the future. And three elements for that. One is we need to get responsibilities clear on who. Is it the market? Is it the state? Which part of the state is responsible? So we need to revise where we are here and to which degree we need to streamline that. The second element is we need better understanding of the state and dynamics of the system. So we have been proposing some sort of European Energy Agency that collects data, that makes reference projections available so that state and market can coordinate for a secure energy system. And the last element also in view of having a resilient and well-coordinated system between different or many different actors is that we need visibility on policy going forward. And here we have goals on renewables, on electrification that help people to understand what the other market participants are going to do. But we also need, and Joanna mentioned that, and the Deputy Minister mentioned that, we need some visibility on what happens, for example, with Russian gas. And I think the policy needs to be quite clear, and we need to strongly enforce that there is no more space for individual member states in the future to buy Russian gas, and that there is no more uncertainty that can be created through outside forces here on our markets.
Yeah, and actually following on the last point that Georg made, this is important, I mean, to stick, of course, to the diversification of sources of supply, not only in terms of fossil fuels, I mean, considering our current level of dependence, but also the question of critical minerals, technologies, and the question, of course, of being devoted to the goal that was designed in the Repower EU in terms of the Russian fossil fuels. We believe that the role of EU's energy diplomacy should be also underpinned within the framework of the strategy in order to, I mean, truly deliver collectively on the needs of the EU and individual member states and avoid stranded assets, for instance, in a broader sense. And the last 2 points, of course, the question of the protection of the energy infrastructure, I believe that was quite widely reflected already, and the question of technologies and clean industrial policies. I mean, this is also something that should be incorporated in the document in order to send the message that we truly think about the energy security in a multi-dimensional way.
Thanks, Szymon. Thank you all. That's the last. I like to promote to read out our report. You have the hard copy somewhere on the table, so it's also available at our website. Thank you very much, and we'll proceed to the next panel.
Thank you very much, Maciek, Georg, and Szymon. That was a very interesting. Thank you. Thank you very much, sound people, Maciek and Georg and Szymon. I'd like to invite our panelists to come up. So far, you've had the policy view on energy security. You've had some study looking at it a bit more closely. And now for our panel, for the next hour or so, we are going to get some perspectives from a TSO, from a think tank, from the financing side, and from a global data side. I'm not sure how you would describe that. My name is Siobhan Hall. I'm a journalist. I'm with Montel News, and I'm going to be moderating it. We also have people watching online. So if you are watching online, there is an opportunity to ask questions. So you should see on your screen a code for Slido. So if you want to ask questions, you can. Also, in the room, you can ask questions. We are back in the room. When we get to the questions, raise your arm and ask a question. Ask a question. And if you ask a question, that will be great. We have an opportunity for an interactive discussion. So this will be wonderful. I'm going to start by asking our panelists to introduce themselves. We will start at the end. And we'll just go down and say who you are, where you're from, and why you're here.
Okay. I'm here because I was invited by our special and honorable hosts, especially Anna and for Energii. We are working together for years and years, and today I'm representing Polskie Sieci Elektroenergetyczne, so the Polish TSO, as the CEO of the TSO.
But your name as well.
Grzegorz Onichimowski, CEO.
This is why I ask people to introduce themselves. Thank you, Jagosz.
Jacques Warichev from the International Energy Agency. We are an international organization. So yes, thanks a lot to Forum Energii for inviting us. So my executive director was invited. Unfortunately, he couldn't make it. And also for the opportunity to review the report. It's an excellent report, and congratulations for publishing it today. So I'm an analyst specialized in electricity security. We look in our team renewable integration, secure electricity at all aspects of electricity security, ranging from the integration of renewables, new energy uses, grid storage, and of course, we are preparing an important event at the end of the month, the International Summit on the Future of Energy Security, and it's a pleasure to be here.
Thanks. I'm Frauke Thies from the Agora think tanks. So we basically bring together Agora Energiewende, Agora Industry, Agora Agriculture, and together with our sister organization, Agora Transport, we address the different dimensions needed on the path to climate neutrality. We have offices in Berlin, Brussels, Bangkok, and Beijing, basically working in Europe, but also key geographies globally on the mission to climate neutrality. And also I am very grateful to be here. Big thanks to the presidency and to you, Joanna, and the great team at Forum for having us here.
So good afternoon. I am Ms. Mini Kyriasopoulou. I'm sure you're happy I'm introducing myself as well. I am the head of division of the Electricity Networks team in the European Investment Bank. We belong to the technical part of the bank, in the projects directorate, as it's known externally. We have been, we are just out of a record year when it comes to files being processed and signatures of loans when it comes to electricity networks. So we are quite enthusiastic and motivated, and we're continuing so into 2025. And thankful for your invitation, and happy to be here.
So thank you very much. That's all our panelists. I'm really looking forward to our discussion. And we are going to start with a question for Jagosz. And I'm going to give you 3 minutes, Jagosz, to describe how transmission system operators can contribute to a more resilient and secure energy system in Europe?
Okay, I think this 3 minutes is here very important, because that's a topic to be discussed for hours and hours, especially as a TSO, because TSO is in the eye of the cyclone all the time. Of course, now in a very special one, because we have a war, and in fact, we are somewhere between war and peace. And we see it as a TSO very strongly. But of course, there are other dimensions of the security which were mentioned already. So we have an issue of physical security, cyber security, security of supply, economic security of our citizens, and how we can address this via markets and, of course, via systems, everything what we do as a TSO. And then finally, our resilience, so resilience of the system, how we address this via, for instance, security of supply, cutting the supply chains, so shortening the supply chains, having spare units for everything what might be attacked, what might be in a risk today. And of course, a lot of those issues, almost all of them, we are trying to address via NSOE, so across Europe. But of course, there are a lot of them as well specific to all of us. And we find different, sometimes different answers, but we share as well experiences. And of course, when it comes to physical dimension of the security, then we need to address to the grids, especially now underwater cables, or like the line which is connected Poland with Baltic states. Yes, because Baltic states are now synchronized via, in fact, single line going from Poland. So this is a huge concern for us to keep it safe. And of course, it is huge concern as well for all of us to have a mean to replace in case anything happens. And this is a great concern, because today our lead times to wait for critical components of the grids are sometimes few years. And this is something we need to address, and maybe the best way would be to address it together, because otherwise it's enormous efficiency, and everything what we do is being paid by our customers, so being paid by all citizens of our countries. So we need to really be here very, very prudent about how much we spend and how we spend. And then cybersecurity, I wouldn't comment on this. That is obvious. And then comes security of supply. And security of supply to us today is, first of all, how we would like to see the system in the future, in few years, in many years. I think too much was said in the latest years about how to finally decarbonize the system, when we still have 50% of coal in Polish case, or gas in some other cases. We should focus on first on things which are simple and they are not so expensive. So starting from that. And that's probably the most important considerations at the beginning.
Thank you, Grzegorz. So we had the physical security, protecting the lines. We have cybersecurity, which we won't get into so much today. And then the security supply and affordability is what you're mentioning at the end. Like, you need more security, but you're going to have to spend money. And so that could, how do you do that so it doesn't raise prices? Brilliant. Okay. So now we move to Frauke.
Thanks.
3 minutes.
3 minutes, yes. And I think you said initially, well, how do we balance the different demands on security, climate, affordability? And indeed, I think balancing suggests that we have some challenges, trade-offs to address, and I'll come to those. But before addressing those challenges, I want to point out that much of it is actually going hand in hand. And I think this is what the opening underlined very clearly, because in the end of the day, our vulnerability to security, our vulnerability to price variability, and a driver for climate change is our dependence on fossil fuels, is our dependence on gas, on oil in general. And And here it's basically a unified answer, and I think the answer is clear. It is, in particular, renewables-driven electrification, to some degree the use of clean hydrogen and targeted use of biomass, especially as a feedstock. But electrification, renewables-driven electrification really being the central element here, and we know how to do it. We've recently published an analysis launched by Agra together with Fraunhofer assessing industrial electrification. The industry is still using a third of gas in Europe. And what we found is that 60% of the not yet electrified industrial heat, being the most important demand driver for industry, 60% of that can be electrified with available technology, and by 2035, 90% can be electrified with technology that is expected to be available then. Likewise, we know the strategies for buildings, we know the strategies for transport. Of course, also that electrification strategy does come with certain challenges, and many of them have been named already. The reliance on critical raw materials and clean tech supply chains, electricity becoming more important as the dominant carrier for energy, and then also the price exposure to weather patterns, as long as flexibility isn't on par with our renewables uptake. The main difference compared with a fossil fuel-driven reality is my microphone still working? Yes. Is that these risks are much more manageable because they can be addressed through European, through domestic policy actions and are not as much exposed to geopolitical vagaries. And I want to highlight two main approaches for addressing those challenges and in parts apparent trade-offs. And the first one is currently debated a lot here in Brussels and across Europe, and that is the whole dimension of diversification and partnerships, CTIPs, the big buzzword around for partnerships, where we need a strategic, a conscious, a selective approach as well, because not everything is strategic, but a lot of things are. So that is the one very important one, to go consciously into interdependencies. And then the second dimension to address the challenges that I mentioned is an integrated perspective on infrastructure. And this is something that Joanna mentioned already in her opening. So basically, as Agora, together with think tank partners, Forum Energie, and also other partners, we asked Fraunhofer and Define to look into or to start a big infrastructure modeling across sectors. And sorry, I'm coming to the close, but I do want to share that. So looking at the European energy system with an integrated perspective across sectors, electricity, molecules of all kinds, and also across Europe. And basically, what we find in that modeling, and it's not yet published, but I'm going to give you a small sneak peek already here, is, no surprise, that an integrated approach across sectors and especially also across countries for infrastructure enhances reliability and resilience of the system. It helps integrate clean energy, and it saves a lot of money. And we're looking around 500 billion between 2030 and 2050 in terms of savings with a truly integrated perspective on infrastructure. And I see we need to close here. So,
Frauke, I'm sure we can come back to this. You don't have to give it all at once. But I think also that ties in with what the previous study was talking about and what Georg was talking about integration of the electricity system to bring financial benefits. So we are moving on now to Jacques. And we've heard already several times today about the dangers of being dependent on fossil fuel imports. So what would you recommend that policymakers prioritize in order to reduce that dependency in a way that doesn't raise consumer energy prices?
Yes, so essentially, it's a very difficult question because we want, as it was emphasized several times today, to have security, including affordability, which is part of the definition. And I will take us back again to the crisis of 2022, where only 10 days after the invasion of Ukraine by Russia, the IEA came up with a 10-point plan for Europe to reduce its dependency to Russian gas. And we emphasized at the time that there was a balance, a trade-off to find between the immediate response to, for example, diversify the sources of gas and the medium, longer-term structural changes that need to take place to ensure that in the future we will not be dependent so much on imported fuels. So I will focus on the second part, which is the structural changes, and of course, they were already mentioned several times. Diversification, it's a key word, not only in the supplies, but also on the routes which are taken by the supplies. There is, of course, renewable deployment. We see that if we take the period from 2011 to 2022, so just at the beginning of the crisis, we see that globally 2,000 gigawatts of renewables, non-hydro renewables were deployed, mostly solar and wind, but also geothermal. And we estimated that if we didn't have these investments made in those 12 years, actually in 2022, the dependency to imported fuels from countries globally would have been 45% higher for coal and 35% higher for gas. So we see that it's a massive difference in actually the response that we could give during the crisis. So it's extremely important. If we take just the case of Germany, which depends to 30% in 2022 on gas imported for its electricity production, its dependency would have been nearly the double. So really the renewables have been increasingly very important. I cannot not mention energy efficiency, which we consider the first fuel. We need to continue to invest in those. And then enhancing energy storage and infrastructure. The grids are extremely important. They continue to play a role, and we need to increase and step up. Of course, diversifying resources means also promoting nuclear where appropriate. We see that many countries have postponed the closure of some nuclear plants, and we believe that there is a lot to do to promote alternative forms of supply, which can be created locally, for example, sustainable biofuels. So all these initiatives can be taken by countries to try and decrease the dependency to fossil fuels imports.
Thank you, Jacques. So there are options, and we have been taking options, but it's a question of continuing to think about how to maximize the security from those options. So with that, we will come to Ismini. Now, you're from the financial side, so my question is, how can financing mechanisms be improved to ensure that prices remain affordable and we improve our energy security?
Okay, thank you for the question. I'm going to start a bit, I'm going to take a step back. I will remind everybody knows this probably better than I do, that what are the building blocks, what are the elements of cost when it comes to energy prices? And we need to produce it, we need to deliver it, we need to somehow manage the system, and of course we need to take care of the retail part of the system itself in the end. And when we are talking about affordable prices, I think we need to clarify that we are talking about the prices for the end user, for the consumer in the end, because one needs to be mindful of the fact that, let's say, what has been mentioned, I think at least 3 times, diversification, and let's say, going ahead with the renewable targets and diversifying our production, and possibly in the long run pushing down the cost of producing this energy, comes with let's say an increased bill when it comes to networks, because we need to accommodate this new, not so concentrated production. At the same time, was mentioned before, and now we are moving to an electrified economy. So the pressure will move slowly from the production to the networks and the delivery of the energy, which means that from what I understand from reports that are available, this is something like 100 billion per year if you front load it. So this cost will find its way to the consumer, or should it all find its way to the consumer? Here is a question. Now, about what you asked, about the financing mechanisms, tools we have. Well, the tools are all there, from equity to direct financing of projects through investment loans. Now, some segments of the ecosystem are better served than others. So, and because banks like predictability, some banks more than others. So there is an inherent aversion to move where things are a bit less predictable. What I have to say is that, and thanks to the Commission also for pushing forward and communicating in February some novel mechanisms, is that tools like sub-financing, power purchasing agreements are being explored. Counter guarantees will have to come into play for OEMs, and but the arsenal is there. I think we need to focus the tools that we have a bit better.
Okay, so the Commission's already come with the ideas that these will work. The power purchasing agreements, contracts for difference, the counter guarantees, and so on. So that was sort of an overview from the different perspectives from our panelists. And I wanted to start, we'll go into a moderated discussion, but I just wanted to start ask whether any of you want to react to something that someone else has said. So I'm going to look at Grzegorz because he was nodding vigorously during Izmini's input.
Okay, I just wanted to add that, all this issue of a grid investment is very important, because this is something which at the end is being paid by all consumers. And to face the stranded assets here would be very, very easy. Because don't forget that there is no optimum and no silver bullet looking from different perspectives. Compare the perspective of the individual having PV on a roof, and a perspective of the retailer selling electricity to him. From the perspective of the retailer or perspective of the utility, probably the best is this old system with a big power plants and selling according to their schedules, so standard schedule of the consumer. But the consumer doesn't want it anymore and has his right to produce himself, to sell himself, to enjoy the flexibility, and maybe take some advantage out of it. And maybe from the perspective of the whole system, this is not fully efficient, but we need to respect it. It's like France having huge nuclear power, and of course now claiming a lot that they have this load following of the nuclear. So switching off photovoltaics or something like that, and reduce the output of the nuclear, despite the fact that it doesn't cost anymore. Yes, because whether they produce base load or they follow the load, is for them the same cost. So from on a top, maybe if you look from the country perspective, this is not an optimal design, but we cannot refuse people to have a right to produce their own electricity. So there is no, I'm saying that it's very difficult to wait at some point what is reasonable, what is not, because the perspectives are very different. And we need to respect what people are, expecting from us.
So I wonder, Frauke, you might have some views on that. So you were talking about a study that was looking about the financial benefits of integrating Europe, but what we're also hearing is the EU is encouraging people to have the right to produce their own energy, and that's a lot more difficult to coordinate, because then you have millions of power production points instead of, hundreds. So how did that come across in your study?
Well, in the study itself, we looked at the transmission level, so we didn't model the distribution level. But I think one thing that becomes very clear is that there is very much of an interaction between transmission and distribution and the resilience and flexibility that we have available at both levels. And I take your point that more and more decentralized production units bring about new challenges for distribution system integration. They do also bring opportunities if done right. And I think the primary one, obviously, is the flexibility that comes with it, comes with dynamic charging of electric vehicles, the way you operate the heat pumps at domestic level. So it's a question of basically how do we define the incentive structures? Do we encourage also the emergence of aggregators, of ways of leveraging that flexibility to put it to the service of the system? And yes, today we still have in some countries also incentive structures that do not encourage consumer behavior that supports the system, but that is rather, as you also described, going for basically individual optimization. And here it's a question of getting the incentive structures right so that we actually leverage the opportunity that we've got with these decentralized units to contribute to a more resilient energy system.
Do you want to respond to that? And then we will move on.
Not much, but yes, I totally agree on the flexibility. This is the right path to go. Yes, but I just wanted to say that that this is quite complicated because there are several points of view, and for instance, the best way to deal with it is when we look at some freezing the prices for consumers. Yes, protecting them. But in fact, we do not protect them. We work against their interest because we, in fact, transfer the wealth from the poorest to those customers who use more energy. Yes, and we waste their potential because this is the biggest potential. So homes with heat pumps, with electric cars, for the use of them for flexibility needs, for instance.
Yes, so this is one of the biggest challenges, isn't it? We're going to a more decentralized system, and how do you operate that in an efficient way and make the most of the flexibility that it may be able to bring? But it's a very different mindset, and all EU countries are at different stages in addressing those challenges. So maybe if we come out a bit wider again. And Jacques, I mean, you were talking about diversification and security of supply in that sense, but do you also look at electrification? Faraka was talking about how we could electrify industrial heat, for example. Are you looking at how electrification will increase energy security and what the challenges are around that?
Yes, of course. We see that today electricity is only 1/5 of our consumption of final demand of energy. But by 2050 we expect countries to be between 40 and 60% of electricity. So there will be a growing need for addressing electricity security. Today already, even though it's only 1/5 of the demand, all societies are completely dependent on electricity for all the versatility of the services that it can give. There are very few devices that function without electricity, especially if they are not connected with the battery. So there is a growing need for policymakers to actually take ownership of the topic. We see that actually, I used to work for a TSO, but I have to say that we have had the tendency from policymakers' side to consider that as a very technical topic, to consider that it's enough to provide some targets of performance and not sufficiently to take a strategic view with a longer term perspective. We talked a lot about diversification. There is a need to have also an orderly transition. We are seeing a phase out of fossil fuel supplies, which are not sufficiently thought about. We see also the phase out of some technologies quickly without actually replacing them with the needed replacements. So there is really a need for this electrification to be now taken as a serious future. But yes, the policymakers need really to step up and take more ownership of the topic.
So you're saying that some of the decisions, some of the high level, we should do this, we should be exiting this, and so on, do not come with an impact assessment. Is that what you're saying? That they're nice things to say to reassure the population, but they need to come with something specific about how to do it.
If we look at the crisis that took place, for example, the Texas crisis in 2021, it was a winter freeze. It was not really a technical issue. Yes, the winterization of the equipment, especially the gas supply, was not good. But actually, it was the origin of that is a strategic decision which was not taken to make sure that the market was providing the necessary conditions for gas units to be available when needed. For example, the 2022 energy crisis in Europe was also an illustration that actually the market design matters a lot. So affordability, so we did have supplies, but it came at a very high cost. And then we saw the consequences. So actually the market design, the approach that has been taken behind, the systemic approach as emphasized by the paper that was presented earlier, is really needed to rethink not only the way we approach the energy system, but also how the context is affecting now even more the energy security. So there is really a need to have a more strategic view. And I think, for example, at the IEA, there was an illustration, which is the creation only in December this year of a task force dedicated to electricity security. Before that, electricity was really considered as, well, that's not really something for a global forum to think about. And now we have set up this task force. We expect a lot from it. It's just a very fresh body in the IEA, but it means that we have now countries strategically discussing how important is electricity for the future.
Well, I think that's very interesting because obviously the IEA was set up to secure oil supplies, and now we see how it has moved on. So talking about countries working together, which has also been one of the themes. So if I'd like to come back to Ismini, I mean, on the projects that you're working on your knowledge, I mean, what evidence do you see that encourages countries to work together, and what can you give examples of where it has been difficult but eventually it worked, or examples where the benefits were so obvious that it happened easily? Did that ever happen?
Okay, the easily part I will not answer, but because it depends from the beholder whether something is easy or not. But I mean, a classical example of countries working together is interconnectors. You know, we're talking about a system. We're talking about an interconnected system. Obviously, a lot of these projects are of common interest or of mutual interest when we are talking about our southern boundaries. These projects are an example of countries working together. Sometimes they make it happen quite fast, sometimes not so fast. As linear projects, they come with a lot of difficulties. All linear projects, I've spent my entire professional career dealing with linear projects. So linear projects, whether they are in the same country or spanning between two countries, have a long leadway. There are a lot of things to resolve when we are talking about two different countries, but there have been very successful examples up to now. In the EIB and with my team, we are very happy to have been part of some of these very successful examples. There is a long way to go still. A lot of projects, if I remember correctly the numbers, but maybe I'm wrong, it's more than 60 billion, and the next 30 billion, and I'm just talking about PCIs, needs to happen in the next 6 to 8 years. The maturities are not there yet, and these projects are very demanding.
So you're saying there's about 30 billion of investment coming in projects of common interest in the next, what was it, 2 to 6 years?
6 to 8 years.
6 to 8 years.
60 billion in the long run, if I remember correctly.
Okay, so basically a big push for projects of common interest, which are supposed to be the projects that will have a wider benefit. But is there anything that you have noticed that particular conditions that made a project more likely to get a final investment decision in the end?
Well, that when the benefits are there, and these are not no regret projects, so this makes the investment decision go faster, and the financiers signing up quite eagerly. Now, if the benefits, I mean, when it comes to interconnectors, they need to come at the right time. They need to, their timing needs to be right, because in the end, these are conduits. They are meant to service energy flows, so that the flows need to be there because the consumer starts paying.
Okay, so it's a matter of timing as much as anything else. So I see that we have quite a lot of questions coming in on Slido, and I just want to check, are there any questions in the room? So if you have a question, you can raise your hand. And we didn't do them all through Slido. Oh, so it's actually quite hard to see a raised hand. But if you have a raised hand, you'll have to tell me if there are other raised hands. I'm having difficulty seeing going up. But if you could say who you're from and what your question is.
Thank you.
Brilliant.
Thank you so much. My name is Volodymyr Vladika. I'm from think tank Buildings Performance Institute Europe. And first of all, thank you very much for organizing this event. It's very important and timely discussion. It's very interesting to listen to all of you and the speakers, importantly, now on the panel. My question would be more like about your view on one specific part of the topic, which is important for energy security. So the report of Forum Energii quite importantly highlights the importance of energy efficiency within the demand of electricity. And also our keynote speakers, Mr. Bolestra and Dite Julie Jorgensen, they highlighted energy efficiency, green energy, and affordability, as you also within your panel did. So my question would be, looking at this, what is the view of the speakers now in the panel on the role of energy efficiency and policies connected to it?
Okay, thank you. So I will ask, I'm not sure we have the right speakers for energy efficiency, but I might put Frauke on the spot. Oh, go for it. Jagosz.
I just one small comment, because from our perspective, so the perspective of the TSO, we are now rather discussing flexibility and efficiency, because very, very often we are facing surplus, not a deficit. So how to accommodate both is that becomes an issue. And for instance, for Poland, one of the answers possible is heat production and green heat production, because we have a lot of district heating. But again, here maybe the problem of the volume is not anymore as important as a problem of volume versus time versus place and a lot of other issues, yes, together.
So when you said permanent surplus, meaning excess electricity compared to demand?
Yes,
yeah.
yes.
Okay,
This is in fact we are having negative prices even on a weekly basis, even in a weekdays, not only weekends.
Okay, Jacques, you said?
Yes, so I'm not an energy efficiency analyst, but we have a full division working on that. So it shows that we walk the talk when we say that energy efficiency is the first fuel of energy security. So it's extremely important. We have seen that if we didn't have the energy efficiency progress made over the last 10 years, that actually our dependency to fossil fuels would have been much higher. I don't have a figure here, but it will be published later this year. And same during the crisis, again, one thing beyond energy efficiency, there was also the importance of demand response, the way that we can coordinate demand to change. I mean, that was, of course, in some cases a bit dramatic, but it's extremely effective. So in case of crisis, emergency, we have the possibility to use demand. And of course, structurally, we need to continue making efforts. There was a pledge made at COP 1.5 years ago to double the energy efficiency progress year after year. We are really far behind these targets, and the progress has been very slow lately.
Okay.
Very quick one, because I quite like some of the questions I see in front of me as well. But very much agree with both of you on the perspective. So I agree it's very much about system efficiency, which includes flexibility. Still, since the question came from the Buildings Performance Institute, yes, I think buildings is a very nice example on how also energy efficiency and systems efficiency go together, because in a well-insulated building, I have a lot more possibility also to buffer with the use of my heat pump and when I use it and when I don't, because the isolation basically gives me this possibility of essentially thermal storage that interacts also with electricity use.
Okay, and that's a form of energy security, because that's at household level. You can secure your supplies. So we're going to tackle, oh, there's an arm up at the back. Good. Can we go there? Ah, excellent. It's a journalist.
Which means my question will be pretty short. You mentioned interconnectivity. My question would be, how do you see the trade-offs in the context of energy security, and what role can multinational lenders like the EIB play in sort of addressing what is increasingly perceived as welfare distribution issues, like in the Norwegian-Danish case?
Thanks for that question. Trade-offs between interconnectivity and energy security. Well, actually, I think the question for Europe is really, what do we mean by energy security? And in a way, looking also at the modeling that we've done and that I gave a glimpse of here, enhanced cooperation inside Europe is enhanced energy security in the context of the global world and the geopolitical situation around us. So it's really that question, yes, European integration internally enhances security in the global context. And maybe to add a dimension to that, and that is again anticipating from our modeling, but basically we looked into a business as usual situation, basically taking the spirit of the TYNDP interconnection, compared that with a very national approach to energy security. And what we find is that if we take that very national approach to security of supply, we would need some 400 gigawatts of additional molecules-based backup capacity, which would, in the case of assuming gas, which is not in line with the climate scenario, would be some extra 200 billion euros. So you could also use hydrogen, methanol, others. But basically, we're talking about 400 gigawatt of additional molecules-based backup capacity if we take a national perspective to security of supply, vis-a-vis a European perspective to it.
Frauke, is this study, you said it's not public, but it's coming out when?
I'm not going to give a date, but it's gonna it's gonna come.
Yes, just to add that, of course, I mean, interconnectors. I can only echo what you just said. And interconnectors, projects of common interest, are priority projects. And of course, lenders like the EIB are having this as a priority as well. Now, what I mentioned before is that their timing needs to be optimized so that they are well integrated into the system with the least burden for the end consumer.
Okay, so timing, the study will come out soon. We don't know when, but we'll all look forward to it. If there are no more questions in the room, you have to raise your hand. Oh, there's one here.
Thank you. Paul Damian from Minota. I want to applaud Gregor's focus on flexibility and not efficiency. But my question is for Frauke Thies, which is, you spoke very eloquently about the importance of system-level optimization and coordination, the savings that can create. And you also talked about the interaction between DSO and TSO level. Across the Union, we have very different industry structures at the DSO level, from one in France to hundreds and hundreds in Germany. Does that industry structure affect the ability to unlock those savings?
It's primarily a question of the regulatory frameworks and incentive structures that you give. So in principle, I think it's not so much a question of which structure you have, but what price signals do consumers receive, what are the incentive structures, and technically you can do that with either. So I think the problem is not so much the structure, do we have one DSO or do we have hundreds, but it's a question of what is the market design and what are basically the signals that consumers are receiving.
Yes, here I would like as well to underline a new approach to distribution. To me, distribution now becomes a competitive business. Yes? It's not anymore like a regulated. We used to have to treat it as a very out of the market, in fact. Now it's not anymore because the energy bill, as it was mentioned many times here, now more and more the grid part is important. So all the services provided by DSOs, their coordination with the TSOs in an effort to reduce the bill of the consumers, to enjoy what they come back with. I mean the flexibility resources, other resources they can offer, is a part of this competitiveness. And I think that now is a key, that regulation should see distribution as a part of a competitive market.
Yes, I think we don't have a DSO in the panel, but Eurelectric is in the room, and I think they did a lot of studies on the importance of the distribution grid, and it's becoming really an essential part of the energy system and of the security. To give an example of which is beyond Europe, it's Australia. You probably know that Australia is one of the leaders in terms of distributed PV installations, as well as storage behind the meter. And if you look at the latest studies by the AEMO, the market operator of Australia, you will see that actually they expect the dispatchable capacities in Australia to increase in the next half of the decade. And why? Because they're actually coordinating all the behind-the-meter resources. They call them customer energy resources. And while they have been seeing a decrease in these dispatchable capacities until now, in the future, most of the new dispatchable capacities coming online will be actually storage behind the meter, which will be coordinated directly at the central level. So there is a lot of potential. It requires digitalization, the right price incentives, the right policies, but solutions exist, and that will contribute to a growth of the distributed resources and their contribution to electricity security.
And one last thing, I mean, one needs to be mindful, because it was mentioned at the beginning that when we are talking about TSOs and the number of DSOs, when we compare, we are talking about 2 orders of magnitude. So, and also the differences between the member states. You can have one DSO in a particular member state, and then in another member state, they might be in the hundreds. So this creates a different mosaic when it comes to their access to finance. And one needs to be mindful of that, not forget, not leave behind the smaller ones.
And is there something that can be done about that? Or is there something that's done about that for the small ones?
Well, teaming up. So financial institutions can team up with the financial institutions that are, let's say, more active in their geography. And that could be one of the answers, but one would need to look a bit more carefully into their needs, because it's not the same. The needs are not the same when you're talking about a national DSO and when you're talking about a municipal company which is taking care of other utilities as well. So.
Okay, so there are some slightly more complex structures needed to get the finance to smaller DSOs. Are there no more questions in the room? You have to raise your hand quite high for me to see it. But if there's not, we will move to Slido. We will start with we'll start with the first question. So I will read it out because you can't see it. So the question is how to ensure affordability while at the same time we have to invest in physical and cybersecurity, increased flexibility, modernized grids. Who will pay? We have an answer from the floor, but we will come to you, Jana, if you want to.
Okay, thanks. Yes. I think if looking at the very big picture, we had part of the answer already in the introductory session, because both Joanna and the Deputy Minister referred to the amounts that we are spending on fossil fuel imports every year, which instead, in the transition, we will invest in, to a very large extent, domestic value and value that we control. That said, we did a case study for Germany, where we basically looked into what it takes to achieve Germany's climate target, climate neutrality by 2045. Whole of economy approach to basically go through the transition across all of the sectors. And the main the finding when you ask about affordability and investments, first one, yes, the transition is an investment, as any transition, that in the first phase you have to make investments. But 3/4 of the investment for this transition are investments that would need to be done anyway for basically reinvestments, normal modernization of the economy. Only 1/4 of it is basically the additional investment in order to make this transition happen. And out of this 1/4 of the investments, the very large extent would be private investment, would be market-based investments, meaning that the public budget and investment dimension that we're looking into this for the bigger picture is actually very small compared with the actual investment numbers that we always have in mind and see thrown around. So I think it needs to be seen in that perspective. That said, of course, there are, in any transition, winners and losers. There are those who find it easier to make the investments and those who find it harder to catch up, and especially as the transition is going very close to people's homes, as we also talk, and we heard from buildings earlier, as we talk about transport, we also need to enable, of course, everyone to make those investments, and that is again a question of support structures, of very targeted ways of also, for example, redistributing emissions trading revenues in order to enable, especially those who couldn't afford the investments otherwise, to make those investments.
Does anyone else want to react on that? Jacques?
I agree with everything which was said, so I will not repeat. Two things to add. The first one is that we tend to look at costs, but not enough at benefits. We are moving towards a more investment-intensive energy system, so we really need to capitalize on that. There is a fundamental question how to pay for it. I was talking about it with Ismini just before the panel. Yeah, so there is really an important financing issue, but otherwise the benefits are way larger than the costs. I forgot the second point, so I think we can skip it.
Okay, just one small piece to add. First of all, we need to not to, in fact, face more danger via subsidizing the danger coming to us. So any euro spent on Russian gas means we need to spend €2 for our defense, because the honest man needs 2 knives, while the attacker only 1. So don't forget about it, and that's the first thing. So when we talk about security, when we talk about security in that matter, it's not just the problem of affordability and whether this is a good supplier or not a good supplier. We need to just conclude what this money is going for, and it's not going for to increase the level of life there for schools, for hospitals, or anything like that. And that's something we need to just realize.
Okay, so it's an interesting point. The affordability also includes where is the money paid actually going to? Who is it benefiting? Jacques, did you remember your second
I
point?
remember the second point, which is actually that I have great colleagues who do projections and scenarios for the future. And if you look at the cost of the energy system in the next decades, at the beginning it goes up. Yes, we are the energy system will cost more in the next decade because we need to kind of overbuild to prepare for the future. We need to anticipate the investments, and at the same time, we still have gas and oil systems which we cannot just neglect. Even though we are electrifying very fast, we need to continue having something that is robust, and energy security for oil and gas remains important. We cannot just leave the few people who will use oil and gas to bear all the costs. But in the long term, the costs go down. So I trust my colleagues on their estimates. But this is because we will integrate things much better. We talked about it already. So the energy system in the future will be way more efficient thanks to electricity mostly, but also better integration and better approaches.
Okay, well, we have used up all our time. So I am going to go down the line, starting with Ismini, going down the line towards Yagos. I need one very short, very short key takeaway that everyone can think about on the way home on what we've just been discussing, or anything you like, really. But one key takeaway, short.
I was thinking about it and at the beginning of the session. So, and in my mind, I think the title is a bit repetitive, and I will explain why. Because a sustainable system is, by definition, a secure system and an affordable system. So, this is what I have in my mind.
Sustainable equals secure.
Okay, I'm not going to go into the renewables-based electrification because I think that's too obvious. So I'm going to pick up, I think in the intro, the Deputy Minister framed the term togetherness. And I think in this session, two dimensions of it spring out. One is the integrated approach to energy, and especially energy infrastructure, but also the unified actorness of Europe in the world as a trade partner for industrial policy and so forth.
Togetherness in what we do in Europe, but also a unified front to the rest of the world. Jacques.
So I will re-emphasize the goal of the paper published today, which is to reassess actually energy security in the changing context. And we have a lot of uncertainties ahead, and the best way to face those is togetherness, or complete, whatever the word was used, but I think cooperation will be extremely important in the future.
Togetherness again.
Yeah, maybe similar. Just referring to the famous Winston Churchill conclusion of not wasting a fantastic crisis we are facing. Because so far, always security of supply or energy security was just a spell to finish any conversation. So when we wanted just to be resilient to any doubts, any questions, especially on a TSO level, we always use this spell. Security, so energy security. And it's good that now we treat it as a reason to discuss, not the reason to be silent.
Excellent. Okay, thank you very much. I'd like everyone to thank our panelists. Thank you very much for the interesting discussion. There is a coffee break now for about 10 minutes, so we hope to come back in about 25 to. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
You mean batteries?
I think I'll send
And Ukraine. Ukraine, that was 2 months.
Yes. I would like to thank you. So thanks a lot. Very vivid and dynamic. Thanks a lot. But it goes
Ladies and gentlemen, we're proceeding for the second panel, so please take your seats. In particular, I would like to invite the panelists to proceed to the scene, and also Kate. Kate is here. We have a bell. So, yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, we should start immediately because the time is running and the afternoon is coming. And please take your seats. We have a space in the first rows. Monsieur, I would like to invite you to take your seat.
Thank you, Chair. I know where the nearest restroom is. I just need to run because I'm on the next panel.
You have a panel. You don't have a time for restroom.
Otherwise, I will.
Really? Oh no, Christian, come on, it's 1 hour. Michał, cześć, hi.
Was war nochmal der Termin?
Das war der 15. 16. Mai.
Monsieur, take the seat. Proszę usiąść, albo uciekać. To proszę, tak. There are still the seats left in the first row, so I would like to ask you to go closer to the scene in order for the panelists to feel more comfortable that you are here, you listen to them, and you're ready to ask the questions.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for staying with us for this panel on the search for a sustainable energy security strategy in Europe. My name is Kate Abnett. I'm a journalist with Reuters. I cover climate change and energy here in Brussels, and I'm delighted to be moderating this panel. So, as we've heard throughout the day, we can't talk about the future of EU energy security without mentioning the energy crisis that Europe went through in 2022, which dramatically exposed the risk of heavy reliance on a single energy supplier. And that experience is a key reason why the European Commission is now revisiting the EU's energy security policy framework to assess whether it's still fit for purpose. But energy security today is not only a question of where Europe buys fossil fuels from. It's a question of grids and whether they're resilient enough to support a decarbonized energy mix. It's a question of whether energy is affordable enough for strategic industries. And it's increasingly a question of critical raw materials and where we source those from and how reliable those supplies are. It's also, of course, a question of protecting our infrastructure against physical and cyber attacks. And as always, it's a question of geopolitics, not only with regard to Russia's role in supplying Europe's energy, but also that of other partners like the US at a time of trade conflicts. So what policy framework does the EU need to achieve energy security in all of those ways? And as the Commission revisits the policy framework on this issue, what should it be thinking about and what should a future policy framework look like? So we're very fortunate to be joined by a panel of the EU policymakers, the member states, the energy regulators, the system operators, and the experts whose job it will be to answer those questions. We are joined by Wojciech Rochner, Poland's Secretary of State in the Ministry of Industry. He's also Government Plenipotentiary for Strategic Energy Infrastructure. Monika Zsikri, who's the head of unit in energy security and safety at DG ENER in the European Commission. Christian Zinglerson, director of ACER, the EU Agency for the Cooperation of Energy Regulators. Damien Cortinas, Chairman of the Board at ENTSO-E, the European Network of Transmission System Operators for Electricity, and Leonardo Mius, Director of the Florence School of Regulation. We'll hear some brief opening remarks from our panelists. I'd ask you to please keep it to 3 minutes if you can. And I'm not going to ask you to justify your existence on the panel, though I very much enjoyed that in the previous panel. And then we'll open it up to a discussion, and we'll take some questions from our audience here in the room and from Slido online. So first, I'll pass the floor to you, Secretary of State. Please share your insights on the future of Europe's energy security.
Good afternoon. Happy to be here, and thanks to the organizers for organizing such an interesting event. I'll start with a short introduction from the legal perspective. I have a legal background, and I'd like to share a couple of views how we actually define energy security in the European legal system. And why doing that? When we're speaking about energy security, we actually discussing a very important and sensitive issue that is at the core of the national competence. It's a shared competence between EU and the member states, but it's very sensitive. And the more we discuss energy security at the EU level, and I believe we should do it, the more potential problems, lengthy discussion, and disputes we may have. But I believe that actually having a quite well-defined concept of energy security in the EU legal system, it can help us to deliver. But the tricky thing is that actually, if you look at the treaty, there is no definition of the energy security. There is Article 194 that discusses energy, but if you look at the 194 of the treaty, we basically have the main objective of this article, and that's the article that defines the EU policy in the energy sector. And it says that basically the objective of the European Union in the energy sector is to establish a well-functioning energy market. And it then says that it needs to be done with taking into account the principle of solidarity, and then sets very detailed 4 points what is the objective of the EU policies. But the fact that we do not have a clear definition of the energy security can be an advantage. If you take a look on the detailed points in 194 of the treaty, we have the security of supply. We have interconnectors. We have a promotion of renewables and new sources of energy. And based on this, I think, and not having a very detailed, precise definition of the energy security, we can build on this a well-functioning definition of the energy security, which can be a doctrinal definition, it could be a policy-setting definition, but then through all these means and streams of the detailed legal basis, we can then build something that could be called the resilient energy system. And there is one more thing I'd like to point out at the end of my introductory words, that's the energy solidarity. The 194 says clearly that the EU policy needs to be organized with the spirit of the energy solidarity between the member states. And it's not a concept, it's not a political concept, it's a legal provision that according to the EU court is a binding concept to the European Commission, to the European institution, and to the member states. So that would be my, let's say, first view on that. And I believe that we have a good legal framework, and based on this, we can discuss and build energy security within the European Union.
That's great, thank you. And very interesting how some legal ambiguity might actually work in our favour. Monica, I'll come to you next. The Commission is in the driving seat when it comes to this revision of the security policy framework. Tell us about the work that you're doing there and what you're aiming for.
Yes, thank you and good afternoon, everyone. I would like to practically continue. To be honest, with all your introduction and all the previous panels, everything was said. So I'm a bit worried here that I will not say anything which is new or surprising. But let me just explain why we are actually revisiting the current security of supply framework, because what we have seen is that there is one which is functioning quite okay. It is not perfect though, but what we see is that there are so many and too many things changing at the same time. One of them, and it's not only the crisis, of course, we have learned quite a lot of things from the crisis, and it also showed a few of the weaknesses of what we have as an energy security framework. But we are also facing a major transition, an energy transition. We have our carbon neutrality objectives. What we see there is increased electrification, new technologies popping up, and this whole energy transition needs to be accompanied by energy security at every moment. The current system, I don't see that the current framework would be able to do that. It would still be able to accompany this transition for the coming few years, but probably not beyond when major changes are happening. So this is one of the big drivers that I see. Of course, the energy crisis has shown that the risks that we have been counting until now with are nothing, or they are peanuts compared to what can actually happen. And it's not just the type of risk that we are facing, but the combination of all these is something that we thought is what was not possible only in fairy tales or horror movies. But what we see is that these risks can actually materialize in combination, and those can be quite difficult to handle. And we also see that there are new emerging threats. Obviously, there is a war on our backyard. Energy infrastructure is being sabotaged, or accidents are happening. We have climate change. Climate change has significant impact on our supply and demand patterns, but also on infrastructure itself. So these are things and emerging threats that the current framework needs to better address. And so these are the changing things that we see around. And the other element that I would like to mention is that, of course, we always try to solve all the issues with one thing. There is no way that we are going to do that. We are revising a framework, a legal framework, but we also identify certain activities or initiatives that we can do around this legal framework. Better cooperation with NATO, cooperation with other partners, or looking at energy diplomacy. So not everything needs to be part of a more limited legal revision, but the energy security framework, or architecture, as we like to call it, is more complex than that, and there can be solutions also in other areas than just strictly looking at revising what we have in terms of rules.
Thank you very much. Let's get the perspective from the regulators. Christian, it's quite a context in which to regulate. There's an energy transition we're in the middle of, and an absolute barrage of risks and threats. How are you going to do it?
Yeah, I want to come back to Grzegorz, who I think closed out the former panel by quoting your countryman, Churchill, whom I'm also a big fan. And he said, you know, never waste a crisis, etc. Yes, and he also said, probably related to that the time of half measures and procrastination is over. Now we're entering a period of consequences, right? And period of consequences for me is about acknowledging and making explicit the trade-offs. Often I find that politics works best by fudging trade-off. I think a regulatory outfit needs to acknowledge trade-offs and come clean as to what they are and how we try to balance things and make so-called fair decisions, as it were. And fairness is often in the eye of the beholder. Trade-off number one, cost and affordability in the near term versus diversification and greater security. There is a trade-off. Poland will know, because Poland contracted Qatari LNG at a significant price premium compared to some of its neighbors, who actually did not install one single LNG facility because it was inefficient. It was inefficient until it proved very necessary. So there is a trade-off. Second, Wojciech, what you're saying, do we do more together or do we do more on our own? Now, we're in the capital of EU, so of course we're all going to, kowtow and say we'll do more together, we'll have a, good atmosphere. I personally believe it too. I'm trying to be a little bit funny. It's not working so well, I see. But the point is more, it comes with a trade-off. Some of those trade-offs are political. The implications of doing more together are profound. How do we coordinate energy policy? How do we redistribute? And how do we cost share, etc.? That they are profound. Third one is, do we adapt our requirements to current structure? Or do we adapt our structure to requirements? Where does that pop up? Well, in the last panel, talking about DSOs. So arguably, the trench warfare of the transition will be fought by DSOs. So a municipality DSO, are they going to fight in the trenches the same way as the all-Ireland DSO? ESB networks? I think not. So what are we going to, and this was actually a discussion last week, right, in this very building, where we had that on a GRIDS event organized by the Polish Council Presidency. And then a fourth thing, and then I'll close a little bit. We were invited a couple of weeks ago to the Energy Council from the Council Presidency, which we're very thankful for. And we tried to put together an informative but also a bit cute slideshow. So I'll ask you, how many of you are familiar with the Italian Marxist Antonio Gramsci? Aha, very good. A knowledge audience. So Gramsci, of course, famously said, when the old world is dying and the new world is struggling to get born, that's where the monsters come. And the monsters is difficulties. We're replacing one capital stock with a different capital stock. The IMF did a very significant analysis on it a year and a half ago. And the point there in terms of trade-offs is, who is going to pay for that? And there's an intergenerational issue, yes, but for sure, I would say from a regulatory point of view, we need to draw on most levers for bring down costs, because we can all celebrate, Jacques, you were making that point, IEA analysis in 2040, 2045, we'll be in a more efficient system. I totally agree. But Keynes famously said, I was saying to Joanna, in the long run, we're all dead. And if you believe sort of the political discussions in this town, we need to find solutions in the next 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, also for industry. So we can't wait for the 2040 celebration, not that anyone was suggesting that. But so how do we navigate that? And I would argue we need to put significant downward pressure where we can on costs as we slowly muddle through towards this other side of the so-called Gramsci gap.
Thank you. Some very rich topics that we'll come back to in our discussion on cost and trade-off. Damien, I'll come to you next. We've heard TSOs are in trench warfare. We heard in the last panel you're in the eye of the cyclone. Tell us your experience.
Thank you, Kate. Let me first introduce, on behalf of who I'm talking now, because I'm the chair of the board of ENTSO-E. ENTSO-E is the association that unites the 40 transmission system operators of Europe, our latest larger than the European Union. I'm talking about Ukrenergo because there's a lot of things that we are learning about what they are going on. And again, I'm going to take a lot of things has already been said, particularly in the previous panel by Jobos and by in other parties, on the fact that security has always been the topic for TSOs, very difficult because it was used, as Hugo says, to close a conversation. And we even try to avoid it for a lot of time. But now it's no longer possible. It's no longer possible. We identified at the association the topic of energy security as the most important one we have this year, very clearly. We were also part of the council. Thank you for the presidency for that. Let me start by something that I think is an evidence but needs to be said, of the fact that the internal energy market is one of the big successes of European integration in Europe. Everyone agrees, I think, this today. It can be improved. There are a lot of things on how to improve it, but it is. But the power system that we manage as TSOs is both the carrier of this market, but also, I come back to that, a key element of the security of the continent and the countries. Every TSO has a very important part to play in the security of its country. And now I'm using the word security because it means a lot of things, also in the sense of defense. And one of the difficulties we are going to have here, to take about the analysis of Christian here, going from a new world to an old world, is about when we talk about this, we talk at the intersection between power system, you are connected to your neighbors. You know that you depend on your neighbors. You cannot work alone. But this connection, again, goes through the institutional arrangements that are being put in place by the states, by the European Union. We need to have arrangements that are going to facilitate a discussion between TSOs, also on security, also going into classified things at some point, but we will need to do that. The different aspects of security, we'll come back to that, will need to go into this direction. And the second one, it was said this morning, particularly by Secretary of State, by Deputy Minister Bolesta, of the fact that competitiveness and security should be the same, should go in the same direction. This is true at a high level. When you go into all the nitty-gritty of how the power system works, not always. You have dozens of regulations that are being made today with a very, very strong market orientation. That was a very good thing, was needed. Today, we need to balance that with a security orientation. Every new legislation we do, we need to look at the security implications. Even things that exist today, we need to look. This was done for a time of peace. Maybe it's the best way to maximize the markets. Should we take a look at security? There is a question that came this morning, is going to come probably now, came just before, it's going to come now, the cost of security. Security has a cost. In the end, the citizens are going to pay for that. But the cost analysis is not exactly the same when you think about security and you think about a market. An army is not paid by the customers of the army, if I go to the extreme of this discussion. So there is a discussion of the cost of security for sure, but cannot be framed in the same way as the cost-benefit analysis or a pure market-based system. And I think this is the new world we need to navigate. And I think as TSOs, we are used to that. Everyone has these roles at national level. We work together in the association. We work with each other. These different roles about the internal market, the defense considerations, the national prerogatives that today in defense, the way they are going to evolve in the future that we hope will evolve, and how are we going to work with that. One thing is for sure, for us, we think this is probably the most important topic we have for this year, even if there are a lot of that are also as important, and we will be ready to cooperate as we always do in our community, but also with all policymakers.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And Leonardo, finally, round us out with your thoughts. How can member states be using regulation to support their objectives on energy security?
Yeah, thanks. I wanted to use my opening minutes to make a point on capacity markets. I was not sure if it would have come up already earlier, and it didn't come up, so good. Thank you for giving me that opportunity. So a key point that was mentioned is that last year we paid 600 billion on imports of fossil fuels. I wanted to add two more key numbers to that. During the last crisis, if I remember well, the colleagues from Bruegel also collected how much public support went into, saving consumers and industries. If I remember well, that was also of that order of magnitude, something like 700 billion, right? And then another key number on security, I think, is Christian's dashboard. I think, do you still remember that? The number of interventions we saw in markets because prices were unsustainably high, and you reached something like 400 plus type of intervention. So I think we came out of the last crisis thinking that, yes, we were happy to have short-term markets as a kind of solidarity mechanism in times of crisis, but we also intervened in these markets. And that's why I think now, after this crisis, we're a bit more worried whether or not we should guide investments a bit more. And that's how I come to the topic of capacity markets, which has always been a bit of a controversial topic, also among academics. And that goes back a bit to the moment that utilities started to ask for capacity markets, which was after the financial crisis, where the perception was that maybe this was going to be abused to keep certain power plants alive, that we preferred to be phased out, including coal, for instance. But I think in today's environment we are, post-crisis, I think these capacity markets can play a bigger role. That's why we already came out with a policy brief saying if they become a structural part of our market, maybe then we also need to think about how to modernize them to make sure they're not abused, but to, you know, that they are used in favor of the transition, not only for security, but also to make the system more sustainable. And also that we then, Europeanize them. And in my opening remarks, I won't say anything about what that could mean, but I'm happy to say a few words more later, because we have already done some research on how that could look like and why you might need to Europeanize them if more countries start to use these mechanisms. Because at the last market reform, we seem to not be ready, right? We said these instruments will play a bigger role, but we left it largely to countries to decide, right? Because it's still a sensitive topic, as you said also, Damian. And also, as you said as State Secretary, that even the legal basis to do it more European might need some interpretation, but you seem to be more positive. I still wanted to use half a minute to pick up on something Monica said, that revisiting the security architecture is not only an energy discussion anymore. You also said it. We're in a defense crisis, right? So we're also thinking on what that means. And I actually have a meeting tomorrow, a workshop tomorrow with a community on space policy. And the space policy community will probably receive more support due to the defense crisis we have. And that then is not only going to be rolling out certain technologies that can be useful for armies, but also for energy. So again, I fully agree with your point that this discussion is not anymore restricted to our bubble, but we really have to think on how these different policy developments interact. So that makes the security topic, I think, much more interesting today than it was in the past.
Thank you very much. I want to start our discussion with picking up on this revision. So the gas security of supply regulation has been enforced since 2017. The electricity risk preparedness regulation since 2019. I think we heard on another panel, the energy security strategy came even earlier in 2014. So the Commission is doing a fitness check, you know, assessing whether in what ways these need upgrading. What, in your view, should be their priority? And also, given this context and the fact that, you know, security is a much broader discussion than just energy regulation, is that going to cut it? Just revising, you know, existing regulation to create an energy security policy framework. Who would dare to take that question first? Monica?
I'm very curious about what the other panelists think about that. But just one point, the revision of the framework does not limit itself to gas and electricity. That's the first piece. So just we are also looking at oil stocks, offshore safety elements and others. So this is just to throw in that we do not get bogged down on only gas and electricity, because energy security, apart from that, we are going beyond energy. Also energy as such is much bigger than just those two markets. So, but I'm more curious because I have my own ideas, but the point is to listen to others.
Damien, you have some ideas as well.
Yeah, maybe just to say that even as I said before, that here we are between energy and defense. In the part of energy, there is much to be done. And the present risk preparedness regulation that is already there from the clean energy package is a very good tool for that, because it helps without going into things that we cannot go, but it helps to prepare for the risk in a way that is coordinated, putting a minimum set of standards for every country in the Union. And we see today, we clearly see how it's helping already prepare for risk. Having said that, I think we need to review it. And we can review it without going into the defense agreements, and there is much more that we can do that. For instance, one idea that was said this morning that I think could be very useful, if I may put it this way, is this idea of sharing means to repair. Preparedness is not only what we do before, preparedness is how do we prepare to Correct, probably not half a right. This is just an idea among many others. I'm sure the Commission will have a lot of them, and I'm sure we will be able to work on that. But we think that it's a very good thing, and we need to take a multi-step approach. And within the present framework of the treaties, we can do a lot, and this is an excellent way to start.
Christian, do you have a view on this? Is the right way to approach it to be revising what's already there?
Probably, I would think. I agree with Damien. I think if you want to get serious about resilience in an evolving threat landscape, you need to build in certain redundancies and slack here and there. And I can see a lot of upside in taking that, let's say, spare parts or that which will be subject to attack even, to look at that maybe pooled a bit regionally, whether it's transformers or other types of equipment. Of course, you need to share the costs appropriately, that goes without saying. And they should be situated in different places, obviously, to increase the security of those particular assets. I think that makes a lot of sense. And then something which is maybe not as attack prone, but is sort of in the gray area between resilient security and adequacy, per what Leo was talking about. If more and more jurisdictions are going down the route of capacity mechanisms, which maybe after 5 or 10 or 12 years will be operating at very, very low utilization rates, they obviously would require payments to stay on. Otherwise, I mean, they will not be there just for the market revenue, because they will probably be used very little. That cost could become very, very big. And if we want to take care of security with downward pressure on cost, why don't we regionally pool it? But then we need to find a way to share adequately the costs, right? So countries will need to share costs in a way which they don't do today. And of course, one needs to be certain of, with the solidarity point, that when that is needed, I'm actually paying for this rainy day type thing, then those flows need to come, because otherwise, why would you even have it? So these are not revolutionary things per se, but they do involve some more regional pooling of efforts. And of course, the allowance also from regulators, if you will, that extra cost is a good one. It's an acceptable one, because the benefits outweigh the costs incurred.
Okay. State Secretary, Poland obviously very interested in capacity markets at a national level. I wanted to ask you more broadly on this sort of question of market design, and is the current market design that the EU has after the EMD reform a few years ago, is that sufficient to promote energy security to the degree that the EU now needs?
Before I ask your question, a couple of comments I'd like to make referring to the previous issues that have been discussed. First, a comment to myself. When I was discussing Article 194 of the treaty, I didn't want to say that we have a very difficult and imprecise legal framework. I just wanted to underline that we actually we have Article 194 of the treaty setting the framework for the energy policies that gives us the opportunity to cherry pick different legal objectives or policy objectives and develop them. Yeah, but we need to do it in a way that combines different objectives that are set there. And that's why I was underlying the security of supply as one of the objectives, but also the energy solidarity. And I believe it's very important, especially while we discuss this too, and especially if we discuss putting the energy security at the top of the European agenda, we need to combine these two. We cannot have the fair discussion about the security of supply and how to share it at the EU level without having a serious discussion about the mutual trust and energy solidarity. This is first. And the second comment is on the capacity mechanisms and the security of supply regulation and risk preparedness. I believe that these two regulations that are in place, the risk preparedness, security of supply, the well-established mechanism that guarantees us the security at the technical level, the security of supply, but more important discussion. And I think they are okay. Yeah, we of course need to discuss whether how we can approve it if necessary. But there is a more important discussion about how we tackle the energy security, the security of supply, the generation adequacy, and then this discussion about the capacity mechanism is far more important than the discussion on the risk preparedness. And then I want to underline it here. Because at the end of the day, and that was Christian was rightly mentioning, we will end up in a situation, especially if we keep the capacity mechanism at the national level, then every member state will have its capacity mechanism and will pay a lot for the generation adequacy, and then the total cost of the energy system in the whole European Union will gonna rise up, and that's not probably something we want to have. And if we can discuss a mechanism that is regionally shared, that is probably something worth of this discussion.
And would that require another reform of the EU's electricity market? How would you actually create the basis for those regional schemes?
I think it would require at least a discussion whether the current EMD fits that purpose, whether we keep the capacity markets. I mean, basically, right now, we are living in the energy-only market logic, yeah? And capacity mechanisms are seen as state subsidies, and then we need to go through the state aid clearance procedure to get them working. So basically, there is a whole discussion ahead whether we keep this model, we keep this logic, or we go more towards the two-commodity market. This is probably something we should discuss. I'm not saying what should be the solution, but that's probably discussion at least we should have. But speaking about the energy market design and about how we see the challenges and potentially also from the security of supply or generation adequacy perspective, I can tell you that because we want to develop nuclear, in Poland we are currently thinking about the construction of the first Polish nuclear power plant. The total capacity would be close to 4 gigawatts. And here comes the question. We go to the European Commission. We have started the discussion about the state aid. And in the current market model, and if you see at the Dukovany state aid decision, basically nuclear should work as a, because of the market design, as a backup to renewables. I'm simplifying, but for the purpose of this discussion, we're thinking how we can better accommodate nuclear that is more effective working as a base load into the current energy markets. So that's a discussion we want to have as well.
Can Monica, I mean, you're here representing the Commission. Do you want to respond to that? Is it fair to suggest that the Commission only sees nuclear as, something that can back up renewables?
I may represent the Commission here, but not all of its policy areas. I don't particularly work on nuclear. From an energy system perspective and having a discussion about the electricity market design and security of supply, I would actually try to draw a line between where the one ends and when the other one begins. For me, electricity market design and how capacity market or nuclear or the energy mix or whatever is actually dealt with and what they are for, it's for normal market functioning under normal circumstances. Under any normal circumstances, the need for the market to have sufficient flexibility is increasing, and so it will require more and more elements. That doesn't mean that we have to consider it under an energy security situation and deal with it and address it from that perspective. So this is where I would somehow draw the line, and so which is beyond this line, so energy security here and beyond, I can answer questions from here, yeah, and on those, I would leave it to experts.
Okay, fair enough, thank you. Before I come to the audience for some questions from you, Leonardo, I wanted to ask you a broader question. So, energy security in Europe is often framed as a question of where the fossil fuel imports come from. And if the EU does, go ahead with its Repower EU plan to phase out Russian energy by 2027, if the energy transition continues at the pace aimed for, that question of reliance on imports overall, not just from Russia, will diminish. So what will take its place as the EU's biggest energy security concern in the coming years?
I think it was already, part of it was said before. If we really go to a more electrified system with more renewable based, possibly in combination with nuclear, right? But anyway, we will have a lot of renewables and more electricity. Then I think we all benefit from pooling our reserves and our backup. So we will have more interconnection, we will become more structural dependent. So we really need to trust each other, even more than today, right? Or we will make the whole system much more expensive. But I don't think we have that trust fully today. I think during the last crisis, we kept borders open, we survived sort of, right, with some intervention. But now we want to go to even more interdependence, structural interdependence. And then I think we really need also, when we plan that system, when we share costs of preventing crisis, we need to talk across borders. You cannot pretend anymore that that's a purely national issue, right? So I was really happy to hear, and I wrote down the quote, right? Security was used often as a reason to stop a discussion, while now we really need to discuss that. You know, you cannot discuss market integration without not integrating security issues or prevention. So yeah, I hope the current more general defense crisis helps us getting closer on energy security, because if it stays purely energy security, I feel we might get back to our national reflexes. But as in the other files, we are willing to do more Europe today. Maybe that also helps the energy file to overcome some of our limitations of the past.
Christine, you wanted to respond to that, maybe on the question of how to rebuild trust that's lacking.
Yeah, I would indeed, because I agree 100% with what Leo said. Let's do a counterfactual for a second. Let's say that in 2022, a sizable share of governments had closed off energy exports. There were a few countries who, let's say, played to a domestic audience and was talking about it. They were actually structural energy importers, so that seemed a non-viable strategy, some of them. But okay, if we take that a little bit, you know, the rhetoric aside, it did not really happen. And some of it was probably rules-based, some of it was because of a complex interplay and interdependency between electricity and gas. But the counterfactual is, what if that had happened? Okay, you had some blackouts in certain places, etc. But more importantly, we wouldn't be having this conversation now, in my view, because this would be off the table. I know who my friends are in wartime. In peacetime, we can hold all kinds of champagne speeches, doesn't matter. But it's when push comes to shove, as the Americans say, that's when you know. So we have now the opportunity at political level, probably at quite high political level, to have this discussion of whether this could be taken by virtue of the fact that it didn't happen. I would argue if it did happen, we would not have the discussion, because trust would have been lost for the next 10, 15, 20 years, and rightly so, in my humble opinion. So that's great. It's great we have the opportunity to take the discussion, but as I said in the beginning, it's not a no-brainer, in my view. I mean, the implications are profound, and it's going to be difficult. So that's why I think we benefit from these discussions at high political level, and let's see where it goes. It may materialize, it may not. Time will show.
Thank you. Do we have any questions from our audience? We have one at the back, the gentleman in glasses. I'll go to you first. Could I also ask the event organizers, can you scroll down on Slido so we can see the questions, please, on our screen? Thank you. Yes.
So, thank you very much. My name is Nicola Pesaresi. I'm head of unit at the European Commission DG Competition. I'd like to make 3 points on nuclear. You got an unfair question, so I can answer to that. Capacity mechanism and flexibility measures. On nuclear, I think we are very happy to discuss with you how you want to organize support for nuclear energy. This is possible, as it has been possible in many different member states. I don't think it's a fair representation of the fact that we want to see nuclear only as a supplement to renewables, but we want nuclear to be able to modulate and be inserted in the market and functioning in the market in the most efficient manner, and not just compensate base load or whatever it is. So in that sense, I think nuclear can be supported in a way which is contributing to the system. On capacity mechanism, everybody has been saying we need more than what we have today. What we have today is a system where every member state basically is allowed to do their own system. And as is often the case, when regulation is not enough, state control is called to play a role of suppléant, as the French would say. We have just produced a proposal. It's up for consultation in the new state aid framework for a little step towards a little bit more of a harmonization of capacity mechanisms, still in a national perspective. But what I hear to do is that actually we should be more courageous. We should do even more than what we have put on the table. I would like to hear more of these voices being said around, because when I go to the council and I listen to the member states' representatives, I often go and listen to the opposite result. Let me do whatever I need, because that's security. That's my own territory. I don't want to hear the Commission to coordinate. So maybe there is an effort to be made at the national level to move in that direction.
Thank you, sir. Do you have a question, or do you just wish to
I
respond to the...
I have a question
okay,
on flexibility
please.
in particular. On flexibility measures, this is a new possibility for member states, but also a challenge, I think, because if we do not integrate security of supply, adequacy, and flexibility, then it's going to be even more freedom for member states to do whatever they want. Shouldn't we make sure that this flexibility assessment is also based on cost effectiveness? Thanks.
Thank you very much. A political negotiation has broken out at this conference, it seems. State Secretary, would you want to respond to that and what we heard there about member states?
I can have and first of all, replying to your question, yes. So of course we need to take effectiveness into account while discussing the flexibility. Because at the end of the day, and maybe one more comment, getting back to the treaty, the main objective is to build a functioning energy market. And if I hear that last year we spent 700 billion on subsidies, if I hear that there was more than 40 different type of intervention in every member states, I mean, do we have a market? And it, of course, is a rhetoric question. And I believe it's not easy to make it from one day to another. We living difficult times of crisis. And I like very much what Christian has said, that we're in a very particular moment that we switch from one world to another, to the new world. And it's always difficult, but we need to definitely have the long-term agenda, building a well-functioning energy market that is built on competitiveness, on trust, and that should be the case.
Okay, thank you. We'll take another question from our audience. We had one at the front. If we could get a microphone to the very front? Oh, thank you, Christian. Hope it's not a question for you.
Thank you, Christian. It's going to be a question also to you. No, I was actually going to ask about flexibility as well. I'm Michael Mieszczanski. I speak for Translate BW, one of our German TSOs. And I was a little bit getting concerned that flexibility was not coming up. because when we speak about energy security, resilience came up. From a power system perspective, resilience, my feeling is getting down. There are many reasons for this, but one of those reasons is flexibility. And my question is, will we all agree that power systems will need more flexibility? Will we get it? How do we get it? I like to believe the pure market is going to make it happen through price spikes, but are we actually going to allow those price spikes? If the market is not going to make it or incentivize flexibility, how else are we going to get it? Do we need flexibility mechanisms? If yes, what are these? Thank you.
Christian, go ahead. Can the market solve it?
It certainly can if we allow it, but that was implicit in your question. Are we going to allow it? And I think that's more for the political level. If we take the crisis on 2022, an extreme crisis, a double supply crunch crisis, the likes of which we have not seen since the Second World War, the answer would be no. But that's in an extreme situation, 400 plus interventions, etc. So that's not the normal, but still it gives cause for caution as to whether this is market only. We recently came out with a market monitoring report, presented some of the insights at the council, and I think it's safe to say with a significant increase in negative prices and very low electricity prices. So in 2023, we had a 12-fold increase in negative wholesale prices, and in 2024, we had another half on top. That tells us something. For me, it tells us that we're doing deployment frameworks wrong. There are a number of assets which are not subjected to system signals. That's a very diplomatic way of saying we need to do renewable deployment in a radically different way. We need much more locational nuance, also via tariffs. You need more locational nuance there. That will take care of some of the issues, but it may not be all of it. We certainly need price signals to come in. And here, I'm going to do a plug for another report we have coming out next week. So thank you very much for posing the question on barriers to demand response and distributed assets participating. And here we like to quote Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, who talked about the future. Our role as to the future is not to foresee it, it's to enable it. And I think a fair share of those things is about enabling these assets to come in. It may not do the whole trick, but if we do the deployment frameworks, if we do locational nuance and tariffs, and if we dismantle barriers for these assets, we can get a long way. If we look at the price spikes that happened in Central and Eastern Europe from July and August and September last year, we basically saw a price decoupling de facto between certain parts of the EU and others. So Greece, Hungary, Romania were at the receiving end, right? And part of that was interconnection, lack of interconnection as a flexibility enhancer, but part of it was also a very unusually low uptake of flexible assets in those jurisdictions. So if I were a government in those jurisdictions, I would be talking about, which they are, interconnection, interconnector capacity, but I would also be looking at the barriers in my own jurisdiction for enabling more flexibility at home, if you'll allow that. So these things, I think, can go a long way. At the end of the day, we'll see if that's enough or whether something else is needed, and that may be the subsidy stuff. But that comes back to how much of that can we afford.
Damien, would you want to add anything on that? I mean, renewable deployment is a success story of the transition, but actually, are we doing it wrong?
No, I don't think we are doing it wrong. But what is clear is that this is something we work with in Energii. We developed a report 2 years ago already on what we call vision for carbon neutrality. Mostly one of the conclusions that is very clear. When you go into a system that has a very high share of renewables, most of them are weather dependent, so you need flexibility into the system in order to compensate for that. When in the winter, during the 3 weeks, you don't have wind, and the days are short, what do you do during the evenings? And so you need flexibility. You need a lot of different types of flexibility. It's an excellent question. And how to incentivize them is a good question. And what Christian said is very true on the fact that we need, in fact, our conclusion is that we need a market design that is going to give value to flexibility. Short term, because people think about things like demand response, but short term, if I take a very engineering term, the problem with demand response is that you have a lot of power, but very little energy, which means it cannot last for long. If you need energy, you need something else. And in the end, we can argue that a capacity mechanism is a flexibility market design. Why? Because in the end, capacity mechanism, what is remunerating? Is remunerating power units that are going to provide power when we need them for long periods of time. So one of our conclusions at the time was very clear. We need market mechanism for flexibility if we want it to happen. That will be very different between the demand response that will come from electric vehicles, batteries, what you can do at home, and for the big power plants that still will be needed when we don't have enough power for extended periods of time because the battery is discharged and you can have them for a few hours, but not for 3 weeks as we can have in the winter. So I come back again to the capacity mechanism discussion. I think 3 years ago it was not the case, but today we see through the association there are very few, probably very soon none, countries who do not think that they will need a capacity mechanism at some point, because it's the only way to have the flexibility you need for this kind of periods. And then there is a question on how to have a capacity mechanism that makes sense, and I'm going to do like my friend Christian, because we have a report that is going to be published very soon on how to design capacity mechanisms that make sense.
Okay, thank you. Some more reading recommendations, and I have the impression that all roads lead to capacity markets on this panel. I'm sorry, we don't have time for any more questions. We're running over, as I'm sure you've noticed, but thanks very much for joining us. Thank you very much to our panel for sharing your insights, and do stay in your seats for the concluding remarks for the conference that are coming up next. Thanks.
It's only the sign that the discussion is really good, vivid, and brings new, fresh idea. From my side, just a couple of words, because I think we already heard a lot of ideas. We are very glad that you stayed with us so long. We introduced the concept jointly prepared by Georg, Szymon, Ugne, Macieks, on energy security, and I really hope it will be incentive, it will give some input to the debate here in Brussels among different member states. We want to say that Europe needs a new strategy now, but as Christian said, actually, in long term, we will all be dead, so we really need to think like next step. So what is the next step? Because we've heard about collaboration a lot, togetherness, but actually what does it mean? How it translates into concrete action? There was also a very important point made by few panelists that still the driver for collaboration is benefits, which we will see, real benefits, which we see from collaboration. And this is where I'm really glad that we work already 1 year together with Agora and Fraunhofer on this integrated infrastructure planning, because it's exactly this what we would like to show, that once we really coordinate, then we can save a lot of money. And basically we live now this year in or basically now we see that the energy prices topic is also part of the discussion about energy security. So we need to really bring down the prices. So it's very relevant for the next steps, not to wait too long, not only promise that one day it will be cheaper or it won't be too much more expensive in the future, but really what does it mean for us now? And here I would like to end and thank you for active participation, all the panelists for extremely interesting discussion. Actually, for years I've never participated in such interesting panel discussion, particularly in Brussels, sorry. Because sometimes it's so general that I don't know where to start thinking about those next steps. But here it was really concrete. We will certainly continue this topic and see you on the road. Thank you.